On today's Locked On Jayhawks, National Signing Day for KU football. The class officially is done between the high school kids and transfers. I guess there could be a couple more once we get to the spring side of things, but let's go over it and what the biggest takeaways are for this class for KU.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Eric Johnson. You can hear me as well on Rock Chalk Sports Talk Monday through Friday, 3 to 6 on KLWN in Lawrence. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get any of your podcasts. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're going to be going over the signing day class for KU. Really no last-minute additions or anything on signing day, no late flips, but we got to hear from Lance Leipold, and we have some extra takeaways to go over with all of the kids that are enrolled for the high school class, as well as the transfer portal is now it's kind of official. Obviously, there can still be kids that transfer out. There can still be kids that come in, and certainly that'll be the case once we get back to spring ball, and certain kids feel like they're not getting as much playing time as they want to, and they want to go somewhere else. But for now, this feels pretty solidified for this moment. This episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. So we're going to start off with taking a look at what KU brought in via the transfer portal for this class of 2023. A lot of additions there, as you can see. 24/7 Sports ranks Kansas recruiting class for the transfer portal as 45th in the country. And there was a lot of pressure, I think, to clean up on the defensive end of the ball to help with a defense that really struggled last season and to help with the loss of Lonnie Phelps. So just going over all these, we'll start with the offensive guys. Logan Brown is certainly the big one. He's probably the headline name of this transfer portal class. 6'6", 300 plus pounds, offensive tackle from Wisconsin. He was a former 5-star recruit, one of the best in the country before going to Wisconsin. Had a pretty good season, and then he ends up getting booted off the team due to some fight or whatever issue happened there. He goes to the portal. A lot of teams were interested in him. Got an 88 transfer grade on 24/7 Sports. That is the same grade that Lonnie Phelps had a season ago to show you the type of impact this kid could have. And obviously you lose Earl Bostic, having a guy that, you don't know for sure if he's going to be that other starter. Like Kobe Baines started to play more and more as the season went on. He's going to have to compete for it, but certainly he has as much talent, if not more, than anyone in that offensive line room. And he is the guy who kind of headlines this class and certainly adds, if you want to be a physical running football team, boom, Logan Brown. Guy like that, you don't see those guys walking around KU campus very often. Lance Leipold said, like, when we had him in here and people were like, yeah, you don't see that football body too often with a guy like that. McDuffie is one of the late ones. He was a running back, came over from Georgia Tech. He was previously at Buffalo with the Lance Leipold staff. They recruited him. He was an in-state guy, stuck around. That was something that Lance Leipold talked about in his presser. And one of the things that I came away with very impressed, because they lose Kai Thomas. You're looking for another running back to be depth, essentially, by Daniel Highshaw, Devin Neal, but compete for those extra snaps or carries, or if somebody gets hurt. And they wanted somebody who was familiar with that, of what they wanted. And the most impressive thing I thought I heard was Lance Leipold at his presser saying, he sent me 4 video clips, and they weren't of him like running the ball. Not one of them did he touch the ball. And all of them were him playing like punt team. Like I forget if he said it was punt return team or punt block team, where he's just making plays. And he said, send this to Coach Simpson. I want to be on special teams. Having a veteran player like that to give you depth and give you another good running back in that room where you're going to use a lot of running backs and guys are going to get injured, but also is willing to help you with your special teams that you've struggled at, that is very vital there. I'll go a little quicker with some of the other ones here. Spencer Lavelle, offensive tackle, coming in from Cal, was previously at Arizona State before that. Again, gives you good size, and it feels like this year KU is going to have a much deeper offensive line. Now, fortunately, they didn't have a lot of injuries last year, but I think they're going to be better on the two deep by a good amount with some of the transfer they brought in, especially with Lavelle, who can play tackle or guard, with Kobe Baines, who came in last year, Logan Brown. Like the depth of the offensive line feels like it's going to be even better this season than it was a season ago. Now, you have a kicker coming in tow with Seth Keller, who was the transfer from Texas State, former like all-conference pick. He should help you solidify that. But the majority of what you brought in here is defense. You look, Patrick Joyner, Demarius McGee, J.B. Brown, Austin Booker, Devin Phillips, Gage Keys. That's 6 transfers that you bring in. And in the case of all 6 of them, maybe not Demarius McGee, but I don't know, at least 5 of the 6, you're kind of expecting to be a part of that two deep. Doesn't guarantee you're going to be a part of it because, we saw this last year, like certain guys came into the pro, other people were already back, more familiar with the system. They were able to maybe beat them out or take jumps in what their level of play was last season. So it doesn't guarantee they'll be part of it, but I think you expect it. The one that I'm not sure about, Demarius McGee, I think Demarius McGee is going to be a very impactful player down the road for this team, former 4-star recruit coming out. He's going to be like a redshirt sophomore, but you just have all 3 your top corners back this year. So it'll be a little tougher for him to get on there, but maybe he could be that 4th corner, right? And that would still put you on the 2 deep, I guess, essentially. So maybe he will be a part of that. More of a rotational player this year, but I feel like McGee will be one of your best players from this class long-term. It's just, there's a bunch of guys that could be in front of you this year. When you're looking at the immediate impact, I look to J.B. Brown, I look to Devin Phillips, and then I think Patrick Joyner is going to play a big role. The 2 Minnesota transfers over, Austin Booker and Gage Keys, are high potential guys to me that I could see starting and being one of your better defensive linemen. You could also see them ending up getting beat up by somebody else if the potential doesn't quite hit just yet. But in the case of Patrick Joyner, transfer from Utah State, previously at Miami. So he has that, I don't know, kind of Division I or Power 5 type of athleticism and play. He hasn't graded out very well, especially against the run on Pro Football Focus, but he has been a pretty good pass rusher. Maybe he can help replace what you lost with the pass rush with Lonnie Phelps, and a different defensive end can be more of your run-stopping defensive end. That'll be something I'm interested in. Austin Booker is a guy with very good potential, 6'6", 240 from Minnesota. Mentioned Gage Keys, 6'5", 280. He's a little bit more of a ready now, I would think. But the defensive lineman that I'm really excited about is Devin Phillips, 6'2", 305 pounds, comes in. This will be his 6th year of college from Colorado State. He's had some really good numbers and grades on Pro Football Focus. Not a guy who's going to put up, 5-6 sacks in the season, but he's really going to plug things up in a really good run defender, and that is what KU needs. He is, to me, probably the biggest addition you've made on the defensive side of the ball, on the defensive line, at least in the short term. In the long term, it could be one of those guys like an Austin Booker or Gage Keys. But J.B. Brown, too, don't sleep on this kid. His transfer grade was given an 88. And we mentioned that earlier with Logan Brown. He was given an 88, which is the same number as Lonnie Phelps. Do not sleep on J.B. Brown. He had one of the highest grades on Pro Football Focus of MAC linebackers last year. He was well into the 70s. If you transferred over, he would have been KU's highest graded linebacker last year. Obviously, it's against easier competition, but Bowling Green had a nice turnaround season last season, and he was a big reason why. Again, we saw a couple transfer linebackers come over last year, Lorenzo McCaskill, Eric Gilliard, and Craig Young. Craig Young obviously ended up, playing at a high level, but in the case of those other 2 guys coming over from non-Power 5s, it took them a little bit longer. McCaskill ended up supplanting his spot in the rotation a little bit more as the season came to its close. For Gilliard, it never really happened. I expect Brown to play because those guys still ended up playing. But, I mean, based on this, what if he's just one of your best linebackers? And if he is, I think that probably could be a good thing because you need extra help at the linebacker position. He's the guy that I'm most interested in because you do have Rich Miller back to be a starter in, essentially, this will be year 3 as a starter here. You have year 2, essentially, of Taiwan Berryhill potentially being a starter. But neither of those guys, were all league type players where if J.B. Brown comes in and outperforms them, it's not like he can't get on the field. So J.B. Brown is the one that could really help change what this unit is. He adds more depth, or he could just end up being your best linebacker. I don't know. Craig Young is probably the answer there, but like I kind of almost view him as like a safety linebacker hybrid, so it's kind of a different conversation. So some good pickups for KU in the transfer portal. Let's get to the high school class in just a second. First, Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by FanDuel. This year, the only app you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 rated sportsbook. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sportsbook in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown. Whenever it comes out, you'll be able to bet on the over-under win total for Kansas football. I like doing the prop bets with the Kansas basketball, like, it didn't hit, but the other day you could have bet Grady Dick to score 20 plus points at nice plus odds, and you can do fun things like that to make the games even better. FanDuel Sports app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel Sportsbook today at FanDuel.com/locked on to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/locked on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Disclaimer in the details below. KU's high school clear this thing. And you're looking like in sports, not like the highest rated class that you'll see out there that we've even seen in some years with like Les Miles and other staffs at KU. 72nd in the composite rank on 24/7 for those rankings. If you do the overall rank and add in the transfers, they're 66th. I'll be clear. I care more about the transfer rankings than I do the high school rankings because, like, yes, you want Kansas to be ranked, 80th as opposed to 120th. Like, that sort of matters. And yes, if Kansas was ranked 30th, then I would care a lot because that's saying that you brought in a ton of talent. But in terms of if Kansas ends up ranked in the recruiting rankings between 50 and 80, that doesn't really matter to me. And here's why. One, we just saw Kansas State, who had one of the lower recruiting rankings in the Big 12. I think they were 9th. Kansas was 10th among their composite roster last year, just win the Big 12. And sure, you could say, well, look what happened when they played Alabama. Well, if Kansas is playing in the Sugar Bowl and they win the Big 12, yeah, I think you can deal with losing to Alabama at some points, right? But I think more than that, Lance Leipold and the staff are going to be a developmental staff. So if the recruiting rankings are 52nd or if they're 74th, it doesn't matter if they're getting the right fits and they're developing them into the players that they need them to be to fit their scheme, to be good players, and to make an impact. That's what's important for this university. So again, if it's, 28th, if they're 24th, then yes, I care about the rankings. If they're 120th, yes, I care about the rankings. But in that middle zone where there's really not that much separation between, number 50 and number 80 or however much it is, I don't really care because that's not what this staff was brought in to do. And I think they're going to develop these kids just fine and well. Now, as far as what you brought, you have some early enrollees already. Jen Ham, a tight end from Eudora, and Calvin Clements, an offensive tackle from Free State. Lumping these two together, both top 10 recruits in the state of Kansas, was just very important for you to be able to start making inroads on that in-state recruiting. And I don't think it was ever really Kansas's fault that they weren't, just bringing in a ton of in-state guys because Kansas has just been bad. And every kid who's grown up in the last 15, 20 years has seen Kansas State be good and Kansas be bad. So, like, which school are you going to take? Now that they go to a bowl game, if they have continued success, you do expect them to do better in the in-state recruiting trail. And I think from this point on, I do start to track that a little bit more. And that's why those two were important. And you flip them both from Power 5 universities with Baylor and Arkansas, both guys that I expect to be really important players for you probably by year 3 or year 4, but right away can come in at positions that you already have some good talent there and kind of learn the system, maybe redshirt and develop even two better players that I think have promising potentials. Saraz Buncombe and Tony Terry have also already enrolled. Tony Terry, 6'5", defensive lineman from Jackson, Missouri. I don't know if the future goal is to put him as a D end or a defensive tackle, but I think he's got a really good potential to him. You fill out the body. I'm sure that'll be the plan with Killer Sleeve. Saraz Buncombe, really good athlete from California and top 900 kid nationally. When you look at Saraz Buncombe, I want to lump him together as you brought in. Jared Sample, So Buncombe more of the size guy, 6'4". Sample is the speed guy at like 5'10". Think kind of like what Trevor Wilson has been providing for the team. Keaton Quebec at 6'2", kind of the in between in terms of the size, but was mentioned by Lance Leipold at his presser as being like a really good contributor in other ways, that he could see the field early as being a player who's really good on kickoff return in terms of like being a blocker or, punt team, and that he's really interested in making those types of plays. But you bring in 3 receivers. That was a position that, as of like 2 years ago, you felt like you were overstocked. Then you lost, like you felt like too many players. Then you felt like you were understocked. Receiver room was really good last season for KU. Now you bring up that next wave so that when you do eventually lose some of these guys like Lawrence Arnold and Luke Grimm, you have that next round ready to go. And that's going to be important for KU. And I think all those guys you feel like are very talented, the receiver positions. 2 really exciting defensive backs that they brought in that they had to fend off other schools from getting. One is Jameel Croft, the safety, who had a great rise. He could end up being a star for you in a couple years. The other, Kobe Davis, whose offer list was insane, little undersized at 5'9", but I don't think that matters. This kid had offers from, TC or Michigan, Georgia. Like, you go on and on and on down the list. You expect those 2 guys to be names that we're hearing a lot about in a couple of years here. Then you have Johnny Thompson, the running back. You expect to be hearing his name in a couple of years. It's going to be tough to maybe get on the field right away in year 1 with all the running backs in front of you. Taylor Davis, another safety you bring in. Blake Harold and Marcus Calvin. Calvin has more of the college-ready body right now, but I think both these guys are going to be developmental defensive linemen that you sit in the program for a few years. And then Logan Brantley, you need to turn around the linebacking core. He's the first high school linebacker I believe they brought in, was at a winning school with Cherry Creek High School. And, he was very, or Lance Leipold was very complimentary on Logan Brantley in the December signing day press conference, basically talking about how, he was a leader. He's someone he kind of expects to be a captain at some point in his career. Now, they have one commit from a JUCO level as well. That is from Akili Hubbard, who is a safety from Golden West College. He was a recent commit, and he's a 3-star JUCO guy, ranked top 25 nationally in that way. He is someone who didn't really play defensive back till he got to college. He was like an offensive tackle, defensive end at a smaller school, it sounds like, to where, at 6'2", 205, at the high school level, like, yeah, you're having to play undersized on the offensive line, but he switches to DB. He had 4 interceptions last year, and you get a kid who hasn't played there a ton. That means he probably has a pretty high potential, especially with good size at 6'2", 205. So you bring in him in, and then there was a move today announced that they'll be adding a punter from Australia, so an Aussie Leagues punter. We talked about Seth Keller in the transfer portal. Now you get possibly a better punter too. I've mentioned before that KU special teams, a lot of their issues have devolved just down to not having a good enough kicker and punter. If you fix those things, that's certainly helpful. And both of those are positions that it's not like, hey, you got to know the scheme to be able to get on the field kind of right away. We're going to finish on Joe KU the Big 12 and released here with this episode of Locked On Jayhawks in just a second. Okay, we get our Big 12 schedule release, and for KU, they have the non-con weighted out. We already knew that. They're going to be playing Missouri State, Illinois, and at Nevada. Nevada, not very good. Missouri State, a game you should win. The Illinois game is going to be a coin flip. Illinois won 8 games. They run the ball really well with Brett Bielema, a team that is very physical. So that'll be pretty key for KU to try to win that game because the Big 12 schedule always tough. What sticks out, they avoided TCU and Baylor. Those are positives. Baylor's always given Kansas trouble. TCU has been a team that KU's actually played well, but they just made the playoff. Probably good to avoid them. You did avoid West Virginia and Houston, though, and that's unfortunate. Those are 2 teams you beat last year. And hypothetically, you would have got both at home for return trips. So that is very unfortunate. Instead, you have like Texas and Oklahoma on there, which you didn't want to try to get both, but I guess you get them in their last go around in the conference. So I guess that's kind of cool. You do get 3 of the 4 new schools with BYU, Cincinnati, and UCF. So you'll have played all of them over the last couple of years. Certainly a challenging schedule, but honestly, no matter what it was, it would have been challenging in the Big 12 because every school you look at is good enough to make a bowl game. It's kind of similar to basketball in that way. I like the fact that the bye week is in the middle of the year for Kansas. It's about a week earlier than it was this past season, which I think is good, but it's not too early in the season as well. Certainly, you circle those last two home games, Texas Tech and Kansas State, as games that you could need to win. But my biggest worry is that, if you only go 1-1 between the Illinois and BYU game, and then you lose at Texas, at that point you could be sitting at 3-2. And then with UCF, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, if you only go 1-2, or you 4-4. But the counter to this is, as much as all these teams could beat Kansas, Kansas could beat all these teams based on kind of what we saw last year in the Big 12. That's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. We'll be back tomorrow to preview the KU Iowa State game. Catch me later on Rock Sports Talk. Don't forget to subscribe to the show. Find us on YouTube, wherever you get any of your podcasts. Till then, later.